A 6-year-old girl was left alone in the middle of the woods, shivering with fever, surrounded by coyotes and shadows. Her eyes, burning with fever, could barely distinguish day from night. Wrapped in a filthy blanket with cracked lips and shallow breath, she waited for the end, until the headlights of a Cadillac illuminated the leaf-strewn path. A Wall Street tycoon who should never have been in that place appeared before her, and what he would do next would change everything. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The silence of the woods was broken by the powerful engine of the luxury sedan as it crawled along the dirt road. Inside the vehicle, the tycoon gripped the steering wheel tightly, his tense hands reflecting the turmoil in his mind. His stubble and sunken eyes betrayed sleepless nights. The corporate scandal blazed across every headline in the country, and his name, once synonymous with success, now carried the weight of hundreds of lives lost. "Cut everything off," he had ordered his assistant before leaving without a destination. No calls, no emails. A light rain began to fall as the headlights revealed something unusual at the edge of the path. Initially, it looked like an injured animal, but as he slowed down, the tycoon realized with horror that it was a child. A little girl, huddled under a filthy blanket, was shaking violently. He stopped the car, hesitant. Years of mistrust and isolation had taught him never to get involved, to keep his distance from emotions. But there was something about that scene that paralyzed him. The child's face, flushed with fever, turned towards the light like a flower seeking the sun. "Help me," she whispered, almost inaudible. The tycoon got out of the car, feeling the cold rain penetrate his Italian suit. He approached cautiously. The girl didn't seem to be more than 6 years old. Her tangled hair framed feverish eyes that struggled to stay open. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice harsher than he intended. "Mommy said, come back," the girl mumbled between shivers. "Mommy didn't come back." He looked around, searching for any sign of human presence, but there was only the silent and indifferent woods. In the distance, a distant howl announced the proximity of coyotes. The night was advancing quickly, making the temperature even lower. "Where do you live? Who's your mother?" the tycoon insisted, crouching down next to the child. The girl just shook her head, confused. Her small, dirty hands clung to the blanket as if it were her only link to the world. The tycoon noticed reddish marks on her arms, signs of neglect or something worse. An old and painful memory flashed through his mind. A hospital room, an empty crib, papers signed in haste. The guilt he had carried for years, dormant under layers of financial success, awoke with overwhelming force. "Come on," he decided, taking the girl into his arms. She didn't resist, too weak to protest. Her small body seemed to weigh almost nothing, and the abnormal heat of the fever radiated through the thin fabric of her clothes. The tycoon carefully placed her in the back seat of the car, improvising a bed with his own coat. As he drove towards the nearest town, he watched the child's sleeping face in the rearview mirror. Something broke inside him, a crack in the wall he had built around his heart after years of disappointments and betrayals. "It's going to be okay," he murmured, more to himself than to her. But deep down, he knew that nothing would be the same. That unexpected encounter in the dark woods had awakened ghosts he had tried to bury. And as the car devoured miles on the empty road, the tycoon felt he was driving not only towards the town, but towards his own past. The lights of the small-town hospital flickered weakly against the rain that was now falling heavily. The tycoon carried the girl in his arms, his soaked suit dripping on the white, pristine floor of the reception area. The nurse on duty jumped up in surprise when she saw them. The contrast between the refined-looking man and the ragged child creating a surreal scene. "She needs help," he said, his usually controlled voice now trembling. In minutes, doctors and nurses surrounded the small patient, The tycoon was relegated to a plastic chair in the waiting room, where he remained motionless, his hands clasped under his chin. His phone vibrated incessantly in his pocket. The world he had tried to leave behind was chasing him even there. "Are you the father?" asked a young doctor, approaching him with a clipboard in her hand. "No," he replied dryly. "I found her in the woods, alone." The doctor studied him with a penetrating gaze, as if assessing the truth of that information. "She is severely malnourished, dehydrated, and has an advanced respiratory infection," she informed him. "She also has old bruises and a surgical scar on her chest that has not been treated properly." The tycoon felt a tightness in his chest. "Surgical scar?" "Yes, near the heart. It appears to have been an emergency intervention, probably shortly after birth." A chill ran down his spine. 5 years earlier, his newborn daughter had undergone emergency heart surgery. The child he never knew, the result of a turbulent relationship with a woman who had disappeared, taking the baby with her. "Did she say anything?" "Her name, where she comes from," he asked, trying to disguise the tremor in his voice. "Only disjointed. Words about a mother who left her in the woods, promising to return. We estimate that she spent at least 2 days alone there." The tycoon closed his eyes for a moment, trying to contain the anger he felt in the face of such cruelty. When he reopened them, the doctor was watching him curiously. "You don't seem like the type of person who frequents that area of the woods," she commented. "I needed to be alone," he snapped, his mask of coldness returning. "Something happened. At my company, an accident." Understanding dawned on the doctor's face. "The dam break case. It was your company, wasn't it? It's in all the papers." He nodded silently. The guilt for the mistakes he had allowed, for the negligence that had cost hundreds of lives, weighed on his shoulders like a mountain. "We will need to notify the authorities about the child," the doctor continued. "Social services, the police." "Do what is necessary," replied the tycoon, standing up abruptly. "Here is my card. If you need anything for her treatment, spare no expense." He was already at the door when he heard the small voice. The girl had woken up and somehow dragged herself to the door of the room, still connected to the IV tubes. "Don't go," she called, extending a trembling hand towards him. The tycoon stopped, feeling trapped by invisible strings. Slowly he turned to face those big, frightened eyes. "Don't be scared," the girl said, with a wisdom disproportionate to her age. "I feel alone too." Those simple words struck him like a lightning bolt. In his world of cold negotiations and precise calculations, rarely did anyone see beyond the facade. But there was that wounded child, seeing his loneliness as a reflection of her own. "How do you know my name?" he asked, confused. The girl frowned. "Your name? I don't know your name." It was then that he realized he hadn't told anyone his name at that hospital. And that strange feeling, that inexplicable recognition. He approached the child slowly, examining every feature of her face, as if searching for an answer to a question he didn't yet know how to formulate. 3 days passed. The tycoon had returned to his penthouse in Manhattan, trying to submerge himself again in the frenetic routine of meetings with lawyers and image consultants. The environmental disaster caused by his company dominated the headlines, with new families of victims emerging daily to sue the conglomerate. "We need a convincing act of goodwill," suggested the public relations director, a short man with a calculated smile. "Something that shows the public that you care." The tycoon watched the city through the panoramic window, oblivious to the discussion unfolding in the boardroom. His thoughts wandered to the small-town hospital, to the eyes of that girl that made him feel exposed, vulnerable. "Are you listening to me?" the advisor insisted. "We're talking about your reputation, the future of the company." "Cancel my appointments this afternoon," he replied coldly, grabbing his jacket. "I have a personal matter to resolve." In the TARS elevator, he tried to rationalize his actions. It was absurd, he thought, to let himself be so affected by an unknown child. Coincidences existed. The scar, the approximate age, they were just factors that awakened painful memories. Nothing more. His ex-wife had left during the pregnancy after a violent argument. She had accused him of being cold, obsessed with power, incapable of loving. "You don't deserve this child," she had shouted before slamming the door. Weeks later, he received the news that she had given birth to a girl who needed emergency heart surgery. Then, silence. Private investigators tracked the woman to a distant country where she supposedly lived with her daughter. Now, driving down the interstate towards the hospital, the tycoon fought against the absurd hope that was growing in his chest. It was irrational, he told himself. He was just checking to see if the girl was okay, making sure that the authorities had taken over the case. It was his responsibility as a citizen, nothing more. At the hospital, he found the doctor who had treated him previously. "I didn't think you'd come back," she commented, surprised. "How is she?" "Better. The fever has subsided. The infection is responding to antibiotics. But, he pressed. "There are complications. Social Services has contacted every foster care facility within a 200-mile radius. There are no vacancies available at the moment. And without information about her identity, the process becomes even more complex." The tycoon felt his heart race. "Can I see her?" The doctor led him to the room where the girl was. Unlike the first night, she was now sitting on the bed drawing with crayons. Her hair, clean and combed, revealed a light brown tone that he knew well, the same tone as her mother's hair. "Hello," he said cautiously. The girl looked up from the drawing and smiled, a pure smile that made something tremble inside him. "You came back," she said, as if she had always been sure of it. "I came to see how you're feeling." She showed him the drawing, a simple figure of a man in a suit next to a little girl, both holding hands. Between them, a red heart. "It's us," she explained naturally. The tycoon swallowed hard, feeling unprepared for the emotion that assaulted him. "Do you remember anything about your mother? Where did you live?" The girl's expression changed, becoming distant. "Mommy cried a lot. She said I needed to be a secret." "A secret?" "Because the bad man might find us. But she always looked at your picture in the newspaper. She kept it under her pillow." The tycoon felt his blood run cold. "My picture." Before the conversation could continue, the social worker entered the DU room, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression. "You are not authorized to question the minor," she said sharply. "We have procedures to follow." "I'm not questioning, just talking," he defended himself. "Anyway, I need you to leave. We have evaluations to do." The tycoon looked at the girl, who now seemed frightened by the social worker's presence. A protective instinct that he had never experienced before flooded him, but he forced himself to suppress it. "Of course," he replied, heading for the door. "I just wanted to know if she needs anything." "The state will provide what is necessary," the woman replied with bureaucratic coldness. In the hallway, the tycoon took a deep breath. It was better this way, he thought. Distance, detachment. It was how he had always lived. It was how he should continue. That child needed a real family, not a man broken inside, stained by scandals and remorse. As he left the hospital, he looked one last time at the window of the room where the girl was. She had pressed her little hand against the glass, her eyes fixed on him with an expression of silent pleading that would stay with him for days. A week passed. The tycoon was drowning in work, trying to stifle the restlessness that wouldn't leave him. The nights were the worst. Vivid dreams with the girl in the woods, reaching out to him, while his ex-wife laughed in the shadows. "The results of the last quarter are disastrous," announced the chief financial officer during a tense meeting. "Shares have plummeted 40% since the accident. Investors are jumping ship." The tycoon nodded mechanically, but his mind wandered. That morning, he had done something unthinkable. He had hired a private investigator to investigate the girl in the hospital. Now, the envelope with the preliminary report burned in his briefcase like a hot coal. "We need you focused," insisted the CFO. "The company may not survive this crisis without leadership." "The meeting is adjourned for today," the tycoon replied, standing up abruptly. Alone in his office, he finally opened the envelope. The first pages contained enlarged photos of the scar on the girl's chest, identical to the one described in his newborn daughter's medical records. There were also comparative analyses of physiognomic traits and an investigation into missing children who matched the description. The last page contained the most disturbing thing: an old photo of his ex-wife in a remote village, carrying a small child. In the background, partially visible, a cabin at the edge of a forest. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Sir, it's the doctor from the regional hospital," informed his secretary. "She says it's urgent." The doctor's voice sounded tense. "The girl has gotten worse. The infection has returned with force, and there are cardiac complications related to the old surgery. We need authorization for a specialized procedure." "Authorization? I'm not responsible for her. Social services is overwhelmed. No one is taking responsibility, and in the meantime she gets worse every hour." The tycoon felt the weight of the decision. What needs to be done? Transfer to a specialized hospital in Manhattan, but without a legal guardian, without documents. "I'll make the arrangements," he decided, surprising himself. "I'm on my way." 3 hours later, an air ambulance landed on the helipad of the best cardiovascular hospital in the country. The tycoon accompanied the stretcher where the girl, now unconscious and connected to various monitors, was being rushed to the pediatric ICU. "We need a complete medical history," explained the cardiologist. "Who did the first surgery? When?" "We don't know," admitted the tycoon, "but I have a theory." He took his own daughter's medical records, filed away for years, from his briefcase. "Compare it to this." The doctor examined the documents with growing surprise. The similarities are striking. Same type of congenital defect, same surgical approach. "I need certainty," insisted the tycoon. "A DNA test. That would take days, and she needs immediate intervention." "Then do whatever it takes to save her," he ordered, his voice breaking slightly. "Cost is no object." During the hours of the surgery, the tycoon remained in the waiting room, motionless as a statue. Memories flooded his mind. The tumultuous relationship with his ex-wife, the arguments about the future of a child he had never gotten to know. At the time, immersed in building his empire, fatherhood seemed like a burden, a distraction. What kind of man thinks that way about his own daughter? "Sir?" A nurse interrupted his thoughts. "There's a call for you. They say it's urgent." It was his private investigator. "We found entry records into the country. Your ex-wife returned approximately 2 months ago with a child. After that, nothing. No records of lodging, rentals, nothing. Keep looking," ordered the tycoon. "Anything, medical records, schools, any trace." When he hung up, he noticed a woman in a lab coat approaching, the hospital psychologist. "The girl said something before the surgery," she informed him. "She asked me to give this to you." It was the drawing that the child had made at the regional hospital, the man and the girl holding hands. But now there was something written in childish and trembling handwriting, "My dad." The tycoon felt his heart clench. Those 2 simple words contained a universe of meanings, of possibilities that he had never allowed himself to consider. "She calls me that?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Not exactly," replied the psychologist. She said that her mother always said that her father was an important man who lived in a very tall building and wore dark suits. When she saw you, she just knew. The tycoon carefully folded the drawing, keeping it in the inside pocket of his suit jacket close to his heart. The wall he had built around himself for years began to show irreparable cracks. "The surgery is over," announced the doctor, appearing in the hallway. "It was successful, but she is still fragile. She will need ongoing care." "Can I see her?" The doctor hesitated. "Normally, only immediate family members are allowed in the ICU." The tycoon stared at him with an intensity that did not admit refusal. "I am her family." The pediatric ICU room was silent, except for the rhythmic beep of the cardiac monitors. The girl slept, her pale face contrasting with the recent bandages. The tycoon approached cautiously, as if fearing that his presence might disturb that fragile peace. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel completely the fear, the hope, the guilt, emotions that he had kept locked inside. Himself, since his ex-wife left, taking the daughter he had never known. "Hello," whispered the girl, opening her eyes slowly. He smiled, surprised by the sudden awakening. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she replied, her voice small but firm. "You stayed with me." "Yes," admitted the tycoon. "I couldn't leave you." A comfortable silence settled between them, as if words were unnecessary. The tycoon noticed details that he had not noticed before: the shape of the eyes, identical to his, the determined chin, inheritance from his own mother. "You know," he began, hesitant, "I've been thinking about you, about who you are." The girl watched him carefully, with a wisdom beyond her years. "Mommy said that one day I would meet my father, that he was a very busy man, but that he had a good heart, even if he didn't know it." The words hit him like a punch. "Your mother talked about me?" "Sometimes she cried looking at your picture in the newspaper. She said she had done something very wrong, but it was to protect me." The tycoon felt a lump in his throat. "What happened to her? Why were you in the woods?" The girl's face darkened. "Mommy got very sick, coughing up blood. We didn't have money for a doctor. She said she needed to take me to a safe place, that my father would take care of me. But she left you alone in the woods," he said, unable to contain his indignation. "No," corrected the girl, tears beginning to form. "We were going to the town. Mommy was very weak. She fell on the way. I tried to wake her up, but she couldn't get up. She asked me to follow the trail until I found help. But I got scared. I went back to stay with her. Then, I don't know, I just remember being alone." The realization of what had probably happened hit the tycoon with brutal force. His ex-wife, sick and desperate, trying to return with her daughter, dying along the way. The door to the room opened, interrupting the moment. It was his private investigator, accompanied by the hospital director. "Sir, we need to talk," said the investigator, his face grave. In the hallway, away from the girl's ears, the man handed him an envelope. "We found your ex-wife," he informed him. "In a public hospital, about 30 miles from the forest where the girl was found. Advanced stage tuberculosis. She is in an induced coma." The tycoon felt the world spin around him. "Alive?" "Yes, but the prognosis is not good." Before losing consciousness, she gave this to the nurse on duty. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter and a yellowed birth certificate. The girl's name, her date of birth, and the names of the parents, his and his ex-wife's, were clearly recorded. "There's also this," added the investigator, handing him a flash drive, "video recordings she made over the years, for the girl and for you." Back in the room, the tycoon found the child asleep again. He sat beside the bed, watching her serene face, so like his own. The birth certificate in his hands confirmed what his heart already knew. She was his daughter. In the hallway, his phone rang. It was the company's public relations director. "The press found out," he announced, alarmed, "about the girl, about you finding her. They are speculating if it isn't a publicity stunt to divert attention from the environmental disaster." "And what do you think?" asked the tycoon, his voice dangerously calm. Well, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters how we manage this." "There will be no managing anything," cut off the tycoon. "This is not a corporate matter. It's my daughter." "Sir, with all due respect, the implications for the company will survive or it won't. Now I have something more important to resolve." He hung up the phone, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in years, his priorities were crystal clear. The empire he had built, the opinions of others, public judgment, none of that mattered before the sleeping child. That night, when the girl woke up again, she found the tycoon sitting beside her bed, still in his suit, but with his tie loosened and the top buttons of his shirt open. A rare sight of vulnerability. "I have something important to tell you," he said, gently holding her small hand in his. "I already know," she smiled. "You're my dad." The corridors of the public hospital were cramped and poorly lit, a stark contrast to the private clinic where his daughter was recovering. The tycoon walked uncomfortably, feeling curious glances following his impeccable suit. The smell of cheap disinfectant mixed with that of sick bodies made his stomach churn. "This way," indicated the responsible doctor, a middle-aged woman with deep dark circles under her eyes. "I must warn you that she is very debilitated. Tuberculosis has destroyed much of her lungs." Standing before the door of the room shared by 6 patients, the tycoon hesitated. "Does she know I'm coming?" "Yes. It was the first time we saw her. React since she arrived. She asked for paper and a pen, wrote your name." Taking a deep breath, he entered. His ex-wife was in the last bed, separated from the others by a makeshift screen. Time and disease had been merciless. The once vibrant face was now a pale and hollow mask. The hair, once long and shiny, was thin and lifeless. "You came," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. He pulled up a chair, sitting at a cautious distance from the bed. He felt a storm of contradictory emotions. Anger for the abandonment, for the lie, for the time lost with his daughter. Compassion for the woman visibly on the verge of death. Confusion about what had really happened. "Why?" was all he could say. She closed her eyes for a moment. "Fear. Of you. Of your power. Of what you could do if you knew the truth." "That I was a father." She nodded weakly. "That night, when we argued, you said that a child would be inconvenient, that it would ruin your plans." The tycoon remembered that discussion, his coldness, the obsession with the company, the inability to see beyond the numbers, cruel words said without measuring consequences. "So you ran away, taking my daughter." A fit of coughing prevented her from answering immediately. When she finally managed to speak, her voice was just a breath. "I thought it would be better for her, away from your ambition, from your heartless world. For 6 years, he said, the bitterness evident. For 6 years you deprived me of knowing her, of seeing her grow up. And for 6 years you didn't even look for us," she countered, a spark of the old temperament shining in her dull eyes. "Your detectives gave up after a few months. You went back to your life as if we had never existed." The truth of those words hit him like a physical blow. He had given up, allowing the lawyers and investigators to file the case away. The company grew, profits multiplied, and the pain of loss was buried under layers of obsessive work. "When I learned that I was sick," she continued, "I realized that I needed to bring her back, that she would need you." "Why the woods? Why didn't you look for me directly?" A sad smile crossed the ravaged face. I tried. 3 times I was turned away at the reception of your company. No one believed that I had any connection with you. She paused, breathing with difficulty. Then I thought about going to the town where your mother lived. The woods were a shortcut. I was too weak. The tycoon remembered the cabin his mother kept near that forest, a refuge that he himself had frequented in childhood. Fate, with its cruel irony, had drawn a complete circle. She is extraordinary, he said, his voice softening. Intelligent, strong. She survived alone for days. Tears streamed down the woman's skeletal face. I never stopped talking about you. I showed her pictures, told her stories. I wanted her to know that despite everything, her father was a man of worth. Those words disarmed him completely. After years of nurturing resentment, imagining revenge, he confronted a different truth. She had never destroyed his image. In the eyes of his daughter, I want you to stay with her, whispered the ex-wife. Promise me that you will take care of her, that you will be the father she always imagined. You're going to recover, he said without conviction. The best specialists? No, she interrupted, shaking her head slightly. It's too late, but for you two, it's just the beginning. From the inside pocket of his suit jacket, the tycoon removed the flash drive that the investigator had given him. The videos you recorded, so that she would remember me, and so that you would understand. A doctor entered the room, checking monitors. She needs to rest now, he warned, giving the tycoon a meaningful look. Standing up, he hesitated, uncertain about how to say goodbye. Years of anger and resentment dissolved before the raw reality of imminent death. Take care of our daughter, she whispered, closing her eyes. And please, forgive me. In the hallway, the tycoon felt the weight of the flash drive in his hand, as if he carried all the lost past. His phone rang. It was the hospital where his daughter was interned. Sir, there are people from social services here, informed the nurse nervously. They say they came to take the girl. I'm on my way, he replied, his tone leaving no room for discussion. Tell them to wait and call my lawyers. As he drove back to the clinic, a thought crystallized in his mind with absolute clarity. He wouldn't lose his daughter again. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice, she was his priority now. The financial empire, the public reputation, the opinions of others, all of that seemed insignificant compared to the bond he had discovered in the depths of his being. The judge's chambers were packed. On one side, the tycoon and his team of elite lawyers. On the other, representatives from social services and the district attorney responsible for cases involving minors. In the center of the table, a thick file containing medical records, psychological reports, and legal documents, all related to the custody of a 6-year-old girl. This preliminary hearing is of an emergency and confidential nature, began the judge, an elderly man with a tired expression. I understand the urgency considering the child's medical circumstances. Your Honor, the district attorney, a middle-aged woman with a firm voice, spoke first. We acknowledge that the gentleman in question has provided medical care for the minor. However, there are serious concerns about his motivations. The tycoon maintained an impassive face, although inside he felt a growing rage. His daughter was recovering from heart surgery, and these bureaucrats were arguing as if she were an object, a pawn. Specifically, continued the district attorney, we question whether this sudden show of interest is nothing more than a public relations strategy to divert attention from the environmental disaster caused by his company. With all due respect, intervened the tycoon's lead attorney. My client has presented conclusive evidence of paternity. The DNA test confirms with 99.9% certainty that he is the biological father of the child. The judge flipped through the documents. Yes, I see. The results here. There is also the original birth certificate, a certificate that was not properly registered, countered the district attorney. And there is the issue of abandonment. For 6 years, your client showed no interest in his daughter. The tycoon could no longer contain himself. I didn't know where they were, he said, his voice low but intense. My daughter's mother left, taking her when she was just a newborn. I looked for her, hired investigators. The reports are all there with the correct dates. For a few months only, retorted the district attorney. Then, apparently, you went on with your life. A heavy silence dominated the room. The tycoon felt the weight of the truth in those words. He had, in fact, given up too easily. Your Honor, intervened his lawyer again. There is also the issue of the biological mother. She is in critical condition, but has clearly expressed her wish that her daughter remain in the custody of her father. The judge nodded gravely. Yes, we have her signed statement here. A statement that may have been obtained under duress, insinuated the district attorney, from a woman on the verge of death, possibly not in full use of her mental faculties. The tycoon clenched his fists under the table, containing his indignation. Was it possible that no one there saw beyond appearances, that they didn't see the man, only the mogul under suspicion? Furthermore, continued the district attorney, now handing a folder of newspaper clippings to the judge, there is the character of the applicant to consider. A man known for his coldness in business, responsible for a disaster that cost hundreds of lives. What kind of example, what kind of father would he be for a vulnerable child? The judge examined the clippings with a grave expression, occasionally looking up to observe the tycoon. Sir, he finally addressed him, what do you have to say about these accusations? For a moment, the tycoon considered the rehearsed answers that his advisors had prepared, the impeccable legal arguments that his lawyers could present. But surprising everyone, including himself, he opted for the naked truth. I have made mistakes, he admitted, his calm voice echoing in the silent room. In the company, I prioritized profits over safety. I took risks that resulted in tragedy. I accept that responsibility and the legal consequences that come with it. The judge leaned slightly forward, intrigued by the unexpected frankness. And with my daughter, continued the tycoon, my biggest mistake was not looking for her with more determination, allowing time and distance to erase a pain that should have been my fuel to find her. Pretty words, commented the district attorney, skeptically, but actions speak louder than words, and your actions show a pattern of negligence and lack of commitment. My recent actions also speak, he countered, finally facing the woman. When I found that child in the woods, I didn't know who she was. I just saw a human being in need, and I acted. When I discovered the truth, I moved heaven and earth to ensure her well-being. If that's negligence or lack of commitment, then I don't know what those words mean. A slight murmur rippled through the room. The judge cleared his throat, regaining control. There is something else to consider, he said, retrieving another document from the file. The report from the hospital psychologist who is treating the girl. Everyone turned with renewed attention. The professional report had significant weight in the decision. According to the specialist, continued the judge, the child demonstrates a strong attachment to her newly discovered father. She expresses the desire to remain with him and shows signs of anxiety when separated from him. The psychologist suggests that a separation at this time would be traumatic, a temporary emotional response, argued the district attorney, resulting from recent trauma and hospitalization. It cannot be the basis for a permanent decision. The immediate question, interrupted the judge, is not a permanent decision, but temporary custody while the case is evaluated more deeply, and while the biological mother is still hospitalized. A tense silence dominated the room as the Judge reviewed the documents again. Finally, he looked up, his decision made. Considering the DNA tests, the expressed will of the biological mother, the psychological report, and the fact that the child still requires specialized medical care, I grant temporary custody to the father, he announced, with the following conditions: regular visits from social workers, mandatory psychological counseling for the child, and a prohibition on leaving the country or even the city without judicial authorization. He says, the tycoon felt immense relief wash over his body, as if a physical weight had been removed from his shoulders. However, added the judge, his stern gaze fixed on the tycoon, this decision will be re-evaluated after a period of 90 days. If there is any indication that this situation is being exploited for image benefit or any purpose other than the well-being of the child, custody will be immediately revoked. I understand perfectly, Your Honor, replied the tycoon, standing up, and I appreciate the decision. As he left the office, he was approached by a woman waiting in the hallway, the doctor from the regional hospital where his daughter had initially been treated. I followed the case in the newspapers, she explained. I wanted to know how she is. Improving, he replied, allowing himself a slight smile. Thank you for everything you did. The doctor hesitated, as if carefully choosing her words. That first night when you brought her in, you could have simply left her and left. No one would have known. The tycoon reflected on that moment in the dark woods, on the decision that had changed everything. I would have known, he replied simply. As he walked to the car, his phone rang. It was the hospital where his ex-wife was staying. News that, despite being expected, hit him with brutal force. She had passed away during the night alone, with no chance of goodbye. In the backseat of the limo, the tycoon allowed himself a moment of vulnerability that he would never show publicly. Silent tears fell down his face as he thought of the woman he once loved, the mother of his daughter, and the impossible task he now had ahead of him, telling a 6-year-old child, still recovering from surgery, that her mother had left forever. The morning sun filtered through the translucent curtains, creating golden patterns on the floor of the hospital room. The girl was sitting on the bed, surrounded by colorful books and drawings, gifts that arrived daily, brought by her father, or sent by company employees who now knew of the existence of the boss's daughter. The tycoon watched her from the door, hesitant. Since the hearing with the judge, 3 days had passed, and he still hadn't found the courage to tell her about her mother's death. The doctor had suggested waiting until the child was physically stronger, but each day of silence weighed on his conscience like lead. "Good morning," he said finally, entering the room with a small package in his hands. The smile he received in response illuminated the room better than any ray of sunshine. It still haunted him how that child, after everything she had been through, could smile that way, open, trusting, full of hope. "I brought something for you," he continued, sitting on the edge of the bed. Inside the package was a small carved wooden box. The tycoon opened it carefully, revealing a delicate gold chain with a heart-shaped pendant. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Your grandmother. She wore it every day, said it held precious memories." The girl touched the pendant with reverence. "Is it for me?" "Yes, and there's something else." Pressing a small side latch, the heart opened, revealing a compartment. Inside was a tiny photograph, a young and smiling woman holding a baby. "Mommy," whispered the girl, immediately recognizing her. The tycoon nodded, feeling his throat tighten. "And you, when you were a baby." The girl studied the photo for a long moment, her small fingers tracing the outline of her mother's face. "She'll be happy when she knows we're together." The moment had arrived, inevitable as the tide. The tycoon took his daughter's little hands between his, searching for words that didn't exist. "Sweetheart," he began, his voice trembling. "Remember," I told you that your mother was very sick." The child's eyes, so similar to his own, fixed on him with a perception that went beyond her age. "She's not going to get better, is she?" The question, so direct and perceptive, left him momentarily speechless. "No," he confirmed finally. "She fought hard, but she was very weak. Last night, she passed away." "Like the stars?" asked the girl, surprising him with the analogy. "Like the stars," he agreed, remembering what his own mother had told him as a child about death, that the people we love become stars, always present even when we cannot see them. The girl squeezed the pendant against her chest. Silent tears streaming down her cheeks. The tycoon felt completely inadequate, unprepared to comfort that pain so deep and pure. Instinctively, he opened his arms, and the child threw herself against his chest, sobbing openly now. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, rocking her gently. So sorry." "She said she was going to find you," the girl sobbed. "That you guys were going to be together again." The words hit him like lightning. "When did she say that?" "Before we went to the woods. She said, 'We're going to find your father, and everything will be okay.'" The tycoon closed his eyes, imagining his ex-wife in her last days of lucidity, gathering strength for a final journey, determined to reunite father and daughter before it was too late. Guilt, gratitude, and sorrow mixed in his chest in a painful swirl. "And she was right," he said finally, holding the small face between his hands and wiping away the tears with his thumbs. "We found each other. And I promise that from now on, I will take care of you with all the love I have. Your mother will always be with us here." He touched the girl's heart gently. That afternoon, when the nurse came to bring the medications, she found father and daughter asleep in the hospital bed, the girl nestled protectively in the arms of the man who, until weeks ago, was known only for his coldness and determination in business. The news of the tycoon's ex-wife's death and the discovery of his lost daughter quickly spread through the media. Newspapers, magazines, and television programs explored every angle of the story. The miraculous reunion in the woods, the DNA test, the court battle. While some outlets suggested an elaborate publicity stunt, others drew romantic parallels with modern fairy tales. In his coverage, the tycoon ignored the phone that wouldn't stop ringing. On the table before him, a series of documents awaited. His signature, his resignation as CEO of the company he had built, the transfer of 40% of his shares to a trust fund in his daughter's name, and the purchase papers for a house in the countryside, away from the skyscrapers and urban bustle. His lawyer watched him with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Are you sure about this? You built this empire from scratch." "And what did it bring me?" replied the tycoon, signing the documents one after another. "Power, respect, maybe. But no real joy, no purpose beyond the next deal, the next acquisition. And now you have a purpose," concluded the lawyer, a rare smile softening his normally austere features. "Now I have a daughter," corrected the tycoon, "and I need to be the man she believes I am." After signing the last document, he stood up and walked to the window that dominated the wall. The city stretched out at his feet, a maze of skyscrapers and avenues that had once represented his entire universe. Now it seemed distant, almost irrelevant. His phone vibrated with a message from the hospital. His daughter had been cleared to be discharged the next day. A new life would begin, no longer in the corridors of corporate power, but on the simple and profound paths of paternal love. "There's one more thing," he said, turning to the lawyer. "I want to create a foundation for vulnerable children, abandoned or at risk. What will the name be?" The tycoon hesitated for just an instant. "Her name, the name of my daughter's mother, so that she is remembered not for the way she left, but for the love she dedicated to our daughter during all those years." As the lawyer took notes, the tycoon turned again to the window. In a few days, he would leave that office, that life, to start another completely different one. And for the first time in many years, the idea of an unknown future didn't scare him. On the contrary, it filled him with a strange and welcome peace. The country house stood on top of a gentle hill, surrounded by a lush garden and protected by a dense grove. From the wide wooden porch, it was possible to see the lake that shimmered in the afternoon sun like a blue-silver mirror. The air smelled of pine trees and wildflowers, a complete universe away from the concrete and glass of the metropolis. 3 months had passed since the tycoon had brought his daughter to this new life. The adaptation hadn't been easy for either of them. He, accustomed to the relentless routine of business, to quick decisions and complete independence, was now learning the meaning of patience and constant presence. She, marked by years of instability and recent trauma, still woke up crying some nights, calling for her mother. "It's time," announced the tycoon, entering the girl's room. She was sitting by the window, drawing as she did every afternoon. In recent months, her drawings had transformed, from the simple and sometimes somber figures of the beginning to colorful and detailed scenes. The current one showed 3 people holding hands under a starry sky. She in the middle, the father on one side, and on the other, a female figure with wings. "Is it ready yet?" asked the girl, carefully putting away her crayons. "Yes. Do you want to come see it?" Hand in hand, father and daughter walked down to the backyard, where a structure covered by a cloth occupied the center of the lawn. With a theatrical gesture, the tycoon pulled the fabric, revealing a small treehouse, perfectly built on a child's scale. The girl's eyes widened in astonishment. "Did you build it yourself?" "Well, I had some help with the structural part," he admitted, smiling. "But the shelves for your books, the little table and the windowsill, I made those with my own hands." Those hands that had signed billion-dollar contracts now displayed calluses and scratches, marks of manual labor that he had never imagined performing. And yet, he had never felt as fulfilled as when seeing the expression of pure joy on his daughter's face. "It's like a castle," she exclaimed, running to the rope ladder. "Careful, princess," he warned, unconsciously using the nickname that had arisen naturally between them. While the girl explored her new treehouse, the tycoon sat on the grass, contemplating how his life had changed in a few months. The company was now managed by a board, although he remained the majority shareholder. The lawsuits related to the environmental disaster were moving towards settlements that included substantial compensation to families and projects to recover the affected area. The transition from ruthless tycoon to dedicated father had surprised the corporate world and the press. Some former associates laughed at his early retirement to play house, while others speculated how long that whim would last. Few understood the depth of the transformation that had occurred within him. "Dad!" called the girl from the window of her little house. "Come see." He carefully climbed the rope ladder, crouching to enter the cozy space. The daughter had arranged her favorite books on the shelves and placed on the little table the picture frame with the photo of her mother. "So she can also see our new house," explained the little one, with the simple and profound logic of childhood. The tycoon felt a lump in his throat. "It's perfect." The sound of a car approaching interrupted the moment. From the window of the treehouse, they saw an official vehicle parking in front of the main house. "It's the social worker," reminded the tycoon. "Today is 90 days. Remember, it's the final evaluation." The girl nodded seriously. During the last 3 months, the social worker had made periodic visits, observing the child's adaptation, interviewing them separately, checking the home and school environment. Today would be the decisive report that would determine definitive custody. "Shall we go?" he invited, extending his hand. They came down from the treehouse and walked together to the social worker, a different woman from the one who had received them at the first hearing. This one had kinder eyes and a discreet smile as she saw them arriving hand in hand. "Good morning," she greeted formally. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "We were just getting to know our new tree house," explained the girl. "Do you want to see it too?" A flash of surprise crossed the social worker's face. "Maybe later. First, I need to talk to your father a little, if you don't mind." In the living room, while the girl went back to playing in the garden, the social worker opened her file. "I have to say, when I received this case, I was skeptical. Your reputation in the business world did not suggest paternal abilities." The tycoon accepted the comment without defending himself. He knew that his public image justified such a perspective. "However," she continued, "the reports from my colleagues have been consistently positive. The child is well fed, demonstrates emotional progress, is adapting well to the local school, and more importantly, shows clear signs of emotional security." "She still has nightmares," admitted the tycoon, "about the woods, about being lost." "It's normal considering the trauma," assured the social worker. "The important thing is how you are dealing with it. And from what I've observed and recorded, you are offering the necessary emotional support." She flipped through a few more documents. "We also noted the significant change in your lifestyle, the resignation from the executive position, the move to the countryside, your active participation in her school routine." "It wasn't a sacrifice," he interrupted. "It was a choice, the best I've ever made." The social worker watched him for a moment, as if assessing the sincerity of that statement. "You know," she said finally, "in my 20 years of service, I've seen many cases where money and power were used to obtain custody of children as trophies or instruments of revenge between ex-spouses." The tycoon felt a chill run down his spine. It was exactly what the district attorney had insinuated at the first hearing. "But I have rarely seen someone abandon so much power and prestige in favor of a child," she completed, closing the file. "My report will recommend definitive custody in your favor, without restrictions or special conditions beyond the normal ones for any parent." For an instant, the tycoon couldn't respond, overwhelmed by emotion. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "Don't thank me," replied the social worker, standing up. "Thank your daughter. It was the connection between you that made this decision obvious." After the social worker left, the tycoon found his daughter still in the treehouse, flipping through one of her favorite books. "So?" she asked, surprising him with her perception of the importance of that visit. "She said we can stay together forever." The girl's face lit up with a smile that seemed to contain all the light of the sun. "I knew it." "You knew?" he asked, sitting beside her on the small wooden bench. "Mommy told me before we left. She said, 'Your father will love you more than anything in the world when he meets you, and you will never be apart again.'" The tycoon hugged his daughter against his chest, hiding the tears that suddenly sprang to his eyes. Once again, his ex-wife's words surprised and touched him. Despite everything, she had always known who he really was, perhaps better than he himself. The next afternoon, they both visited the small town cemetery where the mother's body had been buried. The ceremony, weeks earlier, had been simple and private, according to her expressed wishes. Now, before the simple gravestone, father and daughter placed a bouquet of wildflowers picked in the field near the house. "Thank you," whispered the tycoon to the gravestone, while the girl placed a small colored stone that she had painted especially for the occasion, "for giving us this chance." On the way back home, hand in hand with his daughter, he felt a serenity that he had never known in his years of material achievements and corporate victories. The trees swayed gently in the afternoon breeze, and in the distance, the sun began its slow descent towards the mountains. A simple spectacle, and yet more valuable than all the skyscrapers he had ever owned. "Where are we going now?" asked. "The girl. Home," replied the tycoon, "and after that, wherever you want." 5 years passed. The mansion on the hill remained practically the same, although the garden now displayed a meticulously cared-for organic vegetable garden, and the old shed in the back had been transformed into a woodworking shop. The treehouse had gained an expansion, a covered terrace that served as a star observatory on clear nights. In his office, the tycoon, although the term no longer adequately described the man he now was, reviewed the quarterly reports of the Rebirth Foundation, the organization he had created in memory of his ex-wife. What had started as a small project dedicated to abandoned children had expanded into a national network of shelters, mobile clinics, and educational programs that served thousands of vulnerable families. "Dad?" called a voice from the door. "Can I come in?" He looked up, smiling as he saw his daughter, now 11 years old, her hair braided and a thick book under her arm. "Of course, Princess, always." "I need help with my science project," she explained, placing the book on the table. "It's about plant life cycles, and I thought we could use our vegetable garden as a laboratory." "Excellent idea. We can start after lunch." She nodded but remained standing, watching him with that intensity that always disconcerted him a little. "You're happy, aren't you?" The question, so direct and profound, was typical of her. Since she was little, she had demonstrated a keen sensitivity to the emotions of others, an ability to see beyond appearances. "More than I ever imagined possible," he replied honestly, "even having left your company and all that money." He smiled. Although they lived comfortably, their current lifestyle was modest compared to the previous opulence. A large part of his fortune had been directed to the foundation, sustainable investments, and above all, to ensure the future of his daughter and the causes they believed in. "What I left behind cannot be compared to what I found," he replied, standing up to hug her. "You taught me what really matters." That afternoon, while they worked together in the garden, cataloging plants and preparing the scientific experiment, the tycoon reflected on the extraordinary journey that had united them. From the dark woods where he had found her feverish and abandoned to this simple moment of domestic happiness, an unexpected path of redemption and discovery. The phone rang in the house, and the housekeeper came to warn him of an important call. It was the former chief financial officer of his company. "The shareholders are restless," informed the familiar voice. "Shares have fallen 12% in the last quarter. The administrative board believes that the company needs stronger leadership, more in your style." "Are they inviting me back?" he asked, surprised. "Not just inviting, begging, with full autonomy and a compensation package substantially larger than the previous one." Years ago, such an offer would have been irresistible. Power, recognition, the chance to prove once again his supremacy in the corporate world. Now, however, it caused only a slight nostalgic interest, like the memory of a game that no longer attracted him. "I appreciate the invitation," he replied after a brief pause. "But my answer is no. My life has taken another turn." "Think it over," insisted the executive. "You could run it remotely, hold virtual meetings. You wouldn't have to abandon your current situation." The tycoon watched through the window his daughter, who continued organizing the plant samples, completely absorbed in the task. "My current situation, as you put it, is not something I do in my spare time. It's my life, my choice, and it is unavailable for negotiation." After hanging up, he returned to the garden with an even greater sense of peace. The rejected offer did not represent any sacrifice, only the confirmation of his priorities. "Everything okay?" asked his daughter, noticing his thoughtful expression. "Everything's perfect," he assured her. "Just a ghost from the past knocking on the door." She nodded, understanding more than his words said, as she always did. That night, while his daughter slept, The tycoon climbed up to the treehouse with a cup of hot tea. It was a ritual he had developed over the years, moments of solitude under the stars, where he spoke silently with the memory of his ex-wife. On the windowsill, next to the telescope he had installed for his daughter, was the flash drive with the videos she had recorded during the years of separation. He had watched them all, countless times, witnessing his daughter's growth through her mother's loving eyes. In each recording, she spoke to the girl about her father, never with resentment, always preserving an image of strength, integrity, and love, even when he himself did not correspond to that ideal. "You always knew," he murmured to the stars. "You knew I could be more than I appeared, that there was something better in me, waiting to be awakened." The gentle breeze swayed the branches of the trees slightly, as if responding to his silent monologue. From the house, a scream was heard. In seconds, he was down the ladder of the treehouse, running towards his daughter's room. The nightmares, although rarer, still occurred occasionally. He found her sitting on the bed, her eyes wide and frightened. "The woods again?" he asked gently, sitting down next to her. She nodded, wiping away her tears. But this time it was different. "Mommy was there, and she said she was proud of us, that we are exactly as she always knew we would be." The tycoon hugged her, gently rocking her as he had done so many times in the first turbulent months. "She's right, you know. We're a good team, you and I." "The best," agreed the girl, already calmer. While his daughter fell asleep again in his arms, the tycoon contemplated the room illuminated by the soft light of the bedside lamp. The drawings on the walls, the shelves of books, the photographs, a world built with patience and love, so different from the cold and calculating universe he had once inhabited. The next day, a journalist would come to interview him for a profile about the Rebirth Foundation and its work with vulnerable children. It was the first interview he had given in years, and he had only accepted it because the publication had promised to focus exclusively on the humanitarian work, not on his old corporate life. "What will I tell them?" he had asked his daughter while accepting the invitation. "The truth," she had replied simply, "that sometimes we need to get lost to find ourselves." Now, observing the sleeping child, the tycoon reflected on the profound wisdom of those words. He had gotten lost in power, in ambition, in emotional isolation, and found his way back through the love for a child who, by a miracle of fate, had crossed his path on that dark night in the woods. Of his former self, the cold and calculating man obsessed with material success, little remained. However, he didn't miss him. On the contrary, each day as a father, as a defender of causes that really mattered, as a man reconnected with his own humanity, brought a fullness that no business achievement had ever provided. "Thank you," he whispered to his sleeping daughter. Although he knew that the words were insufficient to express the transformation she had wrought in his life. Outside, the moon bathed the garden with its silvery light. The treehouse, the improvised laboratory of the vegetable garden, the woodworking shop, all symbols of a reinvented life, of rediscovered priorities. A different empire, built not with contracts and acquisitions, but with shared moments, mutual learning, and unconditional love. The real treasure, the tycoon realized, was not what was accumulated in vaults or stocks, but what multiplied when shared. And the greatest wealth was not possessing everything he desired, but learning to desire what really mattered. In his chest, where once dwelled a heart hardened by the setbacks of life and the traps of power, now pulsed a reborn heart, capable of feeling the beauty in simple things, of finding meaning beyond success, of seeing the extraordinary in everyday life. "The greatest fortune," he murmured to himself, while gently covering his daughter with the comforter, "is having someone to love more than yourself." And in that moment of domestic simplicity, the ex-tycoon, now simply a father, felt like the richest man in the world. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day.